Report for January 17th, 2024. I haven't said it wrong yet. I can't even believe it, actually. I'm Jennifer Zeller, the Red Shoe Realtor with Abundance Real Estate. So, time to dive into our weekly review of what's going on in the 262 and the 414 real estate market in southeastern Wisconsin. Um, we have our monthly reports coming out from our MLS system, and I thought it would be great to go through them. So let's take a look. First of all, we're just going to dive into the overall market here. So this is the overall market for southeastern Wisconsin. And as you can see here, new listings have dropped at the end of the year, which is pretty common. However, active listings, and we're talking about Cedarburg right now. So first we're going to dive into Cedarburg, then we're going to go through Mequon, then we're going to go overall Cedarburg. So new active listings are a little bit higher, which tells me things are sitting a little bit through the holidays. And if you look at last year, this is, in January, it looked like maybe that new listings didn't drop off quite as much as they did at the end of 2023. The listing price, so this is active listing, active median price, the new median price, the sold price. And now again, this is kind of what's closing. There's a 45 to 60 delay compared to new listings. So the sold price was high here, which means that there was probably high, the homes that sold had high value. Absorption rate, our absorption rate for Cedarburg is right about 1.4. Again, what does that mean? That means that if we are going to sell every house on the market for every buyer who wanted a home, we only have 1.4 months of inventory. They used to say like 6-month inventory was kind of like equal balance between buyer and seller market. I wonder if that's still true because we haven't come close to a 6-month inventory in many years. You look at a lot of for Cedarburg, a lot of 2023, we were below like 1.2, spiked up in September. And again, it's common kind of in November, have maybe a higher absorption rate. The other thing I kind of wanted to look to compare then, so we're going to go between our cities here. The absorption rate for Cedarburg is 143 for this year, 144 last year. And then the other thing I want to look at our average price for Cedarburg. It went up 4.3%. Last month, though, it was down 11%, so month over month. I think it's better in this case to kind of look year over year. Year over year, it was up 4. Okay, so now let's take a look over, and if we go over to Cedarburg, we're going to switch, or to Mequon, excuse me. We are going to go, so that was Cedarburg, and I believe this is Mequon, or is this Mequon? There we go. Now we're in Mequon. Again, if you remember, when you're in Cedarburg, active price, is higher than the sold prices. New listing. This is interesting. In Mequon, listing price was lower than, or the sold price. The selling price was lower than the listing price. So whatever sold in December in Mequon had a lower value than what has been on the market. If we look at Mequon's absorption rate, so all throughout this year, we really saw that Mequon was selling at a slower rate than Cedarburg. Homes were sitting longer, which if you look here, through the middle, through May through November, we were above 2%, 2 months absorption rate for Mequon. And if you remember, Cedarburg's was 1.2. So that's a pretty big difference. And we were seeing that homes were sitting longer in Mequon. There was more inventory, things like that. Days on the market, which again, it's going to make sense here. Like our days on the market are around 60. Let's go back and look at Cedarburg's days on the market. Oops. This is the Mequon. This is the overall. So let's switch this up. Make sure we're in Cedarburg. Okay, days on the market. See, look how low it was. Days on the market here was so much lower. Again, what we saw in Cedarburg is that the market was much hotter than even Mequon, which is a community right next to it. So it's so interesting. Like you're in two communities touching each other, so similar, yet days on market, things were flying in Cedarburg. In Mequon, again, to go back to there. They all look the same. Look at our days on the market. It's this 20. There was 1 month that was at 20 days on the market. But in MEC1 overall, we've been higher. Now let's go to these absorption rates, which I thought were interesting between MEC1 and Cedarburg. So again, absorption rate is how long it will take to sell every house on the market. And they used to say like 6 months was kind of a buyer seller, equal point. We haven't seen 6 months for a very long time. And, MEC1's was a little bit higher, like we expected, 1.56. Cedarburg's was 1.4. If we look at the average listing price for month over month, MEC1's went up 36%. I think Cedarburg's was down, but overall, I think it's more important when we're looking this close to look at year over year. Year over year, MEC1's price went up 15%. And so maybe that's why homes were sitting a little longer, took a little bit longer because the home values were going up. Cedarburg's, if you recall, only went up 4%. So I also think part of that is that Cedarburg, let's go to, I think part of the reason for that is, stop sharing. There we go. Part of the reason for that, I think, is because Cedarburg has just been a hot market, excuse me, for quite a while now. And I think prices are kind of elevated. And I don't think they're saturated, and I don't think they're dropping, but I also don't think they may not increase as much as like MEC1, where prices maybe were stable for a while and didn't increase as much as MEC1, Cedarburg. MEC1's prices didn't increase as much as Cedarburg. All right, let's just look at the overall Fort County area and see what happened this last month and the year. Active listings are higher than throughout the earlier part of the year. One thing that we really noticed in the Milwaukee area is that our prices are high. I think we talked about last week how we were the 5th highest price increase for the country. Like our prices have remained stable. People keep waiting for them to drop, and I don't think they are because in Milwaukee, we still have low inventory. It's like a really interesting market that we're in right now. Absorption rate. So you can remember like MEC1 and Cedarburg's both were all over. We see here with the overall in the Fort County area, like look, first half of the year, we had a really low absorption rate of like under 1. And then we kind of reaching up toward 1.2, kind of closer to the MEC1's rates. Days on the market dropped really low. So if we look at our absorption rate, so if you look at these two, so our absorption rate was low at the beginning of the year in the Milwaukee market, but our days on market was high. So that means inventory was probably sitting. And number of listings, there's a little bit more active here. Our absorption rate is high here, and our days on market is low. So if you look here, here's our new listings, here's our inventory, that all makes sense. So our absorption rate, this is what's really interesting. So remember in MEC1 and Cedarburg, they were really similar year over year. In the Fort County area, things went from 1.4 to 1.6. 1.4 was really low. So that means last year, December 22, things were still flying in the Fort County area. This year, it was actually consistent with Ozaukee County, basically in MEC1 and Cedarburg. The year over year increase is still so low. That's why you can see our Milwaukee market is just incredible right now. Prices are remaining high. Things that are here are flying out the door, are getting scooped up. Our list price here, the average list price, this looks like not a right number, so we're going to ignore that. But in in Fort County area, you can see year over year, our average list price is up 16%, which is why we are one of the hottest markets in the United States, actually. Oops, let me stop that. And stop sharing. So it's really a good point to remember, like when we talk about like know your national market, know national trends, but you really need to know your local market. And even within your local market, you need to know your cities and your neighborhoods and your different quarters of pricing. It all really matters. So overall, last month, in the last month of the year for 2023, we saw a little bit more inventory come on in the Fort County area, but we saw still low absorption rates, meaning the inventory is still turning over, and our prices are still increasing. There's only 2 markets in the United States, really, 2 or 3, where prices dropped a lot. Austin being one of them. I think so many people moving there maybe got a little flooded. In like Boise. And I think also it was kind of hot a few years ago, and so they dropped. But overall, in the whole country, when we're looking at the whole picture, prices really have remained consistent, and we kind of expect them to, even if rates drop a little bit, because I'm going to add this ticker. Wait, where's our ticker? It's supposed to be going. Oh, well, show it. There we go. There's our ticker. That even though if rates tick down a little bit, we expect prices to stay high because inventory's been suppressed. If you look down at our ticker, the rates today are 6.88, and let's kind of take a peek and see what they have been doing. There we go. So if you look here, rates right now today are 6.8. They have kind of been jumping between 6.8 and 6.6 in the last week. Since the beginning of the year. The low was 6.9, which was a couple days ago, last Friday maybe. And we'll see, here's kind of the flow of what's happened. If we try to look at the 5-year mark of rates, you can see starting in really, I'd say the escalation started in January 2022. And here we overall. If we look at where our rates are compared to forever, like we talked about this last week, it's almost like our parents, and I'm that age now, but when I first bought my house, rates were, 20%, 15%. And to me, that starts to feel a little bit like when we walk to school and barefoot and 0 degrees. Because if you look at rates, I feel like we're kind of moving into like a little bit consistent, rate right here. But if you look since, let's say, 2010, so that's 13 years, rates were below 5 for a really long time. So I don't think it's really uncommon that people feel like rates are so elevated still. All right, let's go back to stop screen sharing. I'm using a new live streaming tool, and I really like it, except for, we're going to fix our background here. It's going to be a dark background soon, but that's why we're red today, although I'm not showing that much. Okay, that's where we're at the market. So I want to talk now about home ownership and empty nesters. So 10 years ago, homes were owned by empty nesters and young families at the same ratio, especially big houses. But what's happened over the last 10 years, it's a lot larger percentage are owned by empty nesters. So I think, as things squeeze as far as like inventory and price evaluations and inflation right now, you can see that it really affects young families more than empty nesters, which makes sense. They've have a longer life of income, more established, probably more savings. If we take a look at this picture here, this is a really good graph. All right, let's dive into this graph. Okay, so this last column here is baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, Gen Z. The blue line is people have 1 or 2 kids, that would be more empty nesters, or 3 or more people in the home, but no younger children, and then living with younger children. And then up the side here is the percentage that own 3 bedrooms or more, so bigger homes. So this last year, this is like 28% of the bigger homes were owned by adults with no kids. And down here is only like under 15% with 2 adults. So it'd be like a young married couple, or 3 people. So I guess here would be maybe even roommates or something like that. 3 or more people living in a home, or it could be living like a married couple and parents, whatever. That only equals like 20% together. Whereas if you combine people with 1 or 2 or 3, but no minor children, for baby boomers, that's 35%. So there's been a significant shift. If you remember 10 years ago, that 3 bedrooms were owned equally between baby boomers, and young families. There's been a significant shift in the last 10 years. And so like when our, younger kids are talking about like how they'll never own a home and how difficult it is for them, sometimes like, oh, I had it hard, but we have to really see that there has been a change in the last 10 years that makes it difficult for young families to own homes and to own bigger homes. It's kind of that affordability crunch that we've talked about. Again, what's going to affect the affordability crunch? Rates coming down, decrease in jobs, which I always think is strange. And so if one of those two things happen, then maybe it won't be quite as big of affordability crunch, and we'll see that number raise of young families who own bigger homes. An interesting point to add that is baby boomers own half of the wealth in the country right now. And so you can see also why they're owning the bigger homes, they have half the wealth. And so it'll be interesting to see as like they retire, sell their homes, like when is there kind of that graph up where younger families start to establish more of the wealth. And let's see, what else do we want to talk about in this likely move? All right, let's move on to our next so we talked about the review of the market. We've talked about kind of empty nester home ownership. The thing I want to talk about is price cuts. I think people have a feeling like price cuts, people don't really have to do it. You set the price, you get it. And so I actually did a poll on LinkedIn today, like what percentage of people do you think do price cuts? And it's surprising. Most people think like 10%, and it's actually average 1/3. So when you think about that, even when you're pricing your home and you're working with a professional and they're using the tools, the market, your neighborhood, your updates, what we think is going to happen in the future, staging your home, it's still a 1/3 chance that your home is going to have a price drop. And there's really no, it's no shame, really. That means like your agent's trying to get you top dollar likely, or maybe market shifted quickly. We sometimes think markets can't shift real quickly, but like in the last 2 years, we've had places where the market shifted quick, fast. Like last January, things were sitting and then they were selling. Of course, COVID, things were just fine. And then they, average that they had been, and then they started selling quickly. And then you go back to like July of 2022, where things were selling and then they were sitting. So things can shift really quickly. So overall, I wanted to show you this over the last 2 years, how long homes are sitting. And okay, there we go. Okay, so if we look here, what homes that are, having a price drop in October 2022 was a high 40%. Like that's really, a high price. Almost 1 in 2 houses are having a price drop. And then they kind of dropped down to less than 20% in July. So it went from 20% in July, not having much of a price drop, to up to 40, came back down in July 2023 of around 30%. Again, kind of the end of the year, we see a spike up here again. Overall, though, all right, let's stop sharing this. Overall, in 2022, so that really hot market, 1 in 5 houses still had a price drop. 1 in 5. That's when people were overbidding and they were doing whatever they could to, get in a home. No contingencies. 1 in 5 houses still had a price drop. Then in 2023, 35% had a price drop. So I think it was the market really switching, trying to catch up. Like, where are we at now? So 35%. Now in 2024 so far, so this month in 2024, we're at 32%, so a little bit lower. And so when we're talking about like prices remaining high in our area, but yet there's a third price drop, how does that work together? Well, overall, we're looking at accumulation of how our inventory is doing. And so if there's a third dropping, that means that there's probably another third that's, going above, and a third that's, going at asking. What can you do to make sure your home isn't one of them that has a price drop? Listen to your agent, use a professional agent, and don't use a hobbyist, somebody that, has their license to do a few deals. Like, use an agent who this is their profession, and then listen to them. Stage your home, declutter your home, have it in perfect condition, landscaping. These are all things that you can do to make sure that your home isn't one of them that has a price drop. But even sometimes when we do all the perfect things, we still, end up with a price drop for whatever reason. And again, if your talk to your agent, they think it's time for a price drop, like, it's not personal, it's shifting markets, and like So it's, when they give you, if you have a professional agent, they talk about it's time to maybe reconsider pricing it to meet the market. Listen, um, it's like kind of any equity, if we could all, time the market exactly. I'm talking about the, stock market. We'd all be great, but you have to take into so many factors, kind of like that with real estate. Anyways, that is your market report for January 17th. 2024. Like I said, today rates right now are at 6.8. What we expect to see in the next, month or so is more homes come on the market, more buyers come on the market. Case-Shiller had a report last week where they said a 1% drop in rates gives you 5 million more buyers. 1% of rate gives you 5 million more buyers. So, that's kind of where we're talking to our buyers. Like, okay, if the rates drop, a lot of people are coming on. How about if we try to get you in a home? If you find the right one, not to like just jump in, but if you find the right home, we'll get you in it and then you can refinance. Anyways, thank you for taking the time. We'll talk to you soon.